hundreds of thousands of people protesting in Yemen. Let's take a look at this. This is in Tahrir Square, right? Yeah, in the capital of Yemen. Let's skip through a little bit of this so you can just see the magnitude of the crowd. But then towards the end of here, let's play. I want you to watch this one. This is a Saudi airstrike that took place just outside of that massive protest. And as the Saudi jets flew over, the crowd was not moved. The crowd didn't scatter. They stayed there. And the Saudi jets dropped bombs, missiles on top of not the crowd, but on the outskirts of the crowd as a show of force and their ability to violate Yemen's sovereign airspace. I mean, they're in a conflict, and you just can't help but to think, like, if the Saudis had bombed Tahrir Square, like, so take a look at this. And there's the So this is the conflict going on. So this is what was going on right outside of the protest where hundreds of thousands of people were. Saudi Arabia had an amazing show of force, amazing and unfortunate show of force in the face of the Yemeni people. So it's still an ongoing conflict that we talked about last week that has the backing of the United States. And in some ways, this is becoming closer and closer to being a proxy war. The Houthi rebels backed by Iran, the Saudi warplanes bombed the rally just outside the rally. And so the Supreme Political Council, which we're seeing, is a coalition between the Houthi movement and the General People's Congress Party, led by former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Saudi Arabia recently resumed bombings in Yemen after months of a ceasefire. And that's what we saw last week at the end of the ceasefire, or as a result of the end of the ceasefire. We saw the bombing of the, I wanted to say church, but the Doctors Without Borders in Yemen. So the ceasefire was brokered by the UN and Kuwait. The war has been both brutal and indiscriminate air campaign waged by U.S.-backed Saudi Arabia. The U.S.'s participation in this has been both very public and disturbing, primarily because of our unwillingness to even correct Saudi Arabia on terms that we put out there for Saudi Arabia, right? Let alone the atrocities, the war itself, the indiscriminate bombings, we'll condemn, if you ask them, we'll condemn the bombing of hospitals, the Doctors Without Borders. But in terms of actually doing something, we've been pretty silent, not only on that, but also the terms that we set out. And it's, for example, on August 11th, the Saudis bombed a critical bridge that ran along the Red Sea coast. And this bridge was a part of the critical infrastructure. And the Saudis had been told by the United States that this should be off limits. And I quote, the U.S. said the bridge was critical to responding to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. Now, not only did they bomb it, but once they realized that they did not bomb it sufficiently, they came back and bombed it again so that they can completely eradicate the bridge, despite the U.S. telling them that this is something that should not be touched. So one of two things: either this was in spite of U.S. demands, or the Saudi Arabian Air Force is that incompetent that they could not comply with America's demands. Either way, America has been mum on our own demands on Saudi Arabia. So not only are we supplying them, and the bombs that we're supplying are being dropped on the people of Yemen, on Doctors Without Borders, but they're also being bombed on critical infrastructure that is necessary for anyone, including the United States or the United Nations, to address the humanitarian crisis. And the humanitarian crisis in Yemen is one of the largest that we've seen in I believe, about 14 million people who have food insecurity. So the American assistance for Saudi Arabia that President Obama authorized last month, this is a quote, authorized last March, include refueling, aerial refueling for coalition jets, intelligence and targeting assistance. American tankers offload fuel to any coalition jet, no matter its target. No matter its target. This support comes on top of more than $100 billion in arms sales with Saudi Arabia between 2010 and 2015, and recent deals made explicitly to replenish stockpiles spent in Yemen. And this is according to Samuel Oakford in the August 19th New York Times article. So our aid is expressly to replenish what Saudi Arabia is expending in Yemen. So the question is why is America so complicit? Not just complicit, but co-conspirators almost. But complicit is probably the more accurate word. I'll leave it there for now. Why are we so vested in Saudi Arabia's war with Yemen that not only are we supplying them, but we're turning a blind eye, not just to it's not the first time we've turned a blind eye to humanitarian crises, right? It's not the first time, but we're doing it. But then two, we're turning a blind eye to our own demands on Saudi Arabia. I want to know what you think. So you can leave the comment. You can call in 857-600-0518, or you can leave a comment in the comment section, and I'd like to read what you have to say about that.